all you've done this whole time is saying, everybody's constantly choking me with all their rules. No, can people just let me be a free spirit? And now you're like, I need direction, not freedom. And I need attention. When people try to give you attention, you're like, F off already. Okay, I'm on vacation. Leave me the F alone. How are we beating on windows, screaming, let me out of the car, after you just said I want to get in the car? And then bounding up the stairs, screaming to these dignitaries who have done nothing but be overly polite to you. F you! F you! Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and today we are doing the Margaret Trudeau book. It's our Sunday read, and the last time we were together, Margaret was showing a new side to her personality. Now, we had known for a long time that she was really struggling against sort of the strictures and the protocol and stuffiness of life as a prime minister's wife, especially when she had such a freewheeling adolescence, and she had really lived the whole hippie wild child life before she got involved with Pierre. So it's been a 180 for her. But she seemed really devoted to creating herself in the image that Pierre most desired. And because she was in love with him, or I would say maybe she thought she was in love with him, maybe she was in love with him, I don't know. But she was willing to do the things he asked for her to do. Then they had kids, and as inevitably happens when you have kids and you have to take on different roles and you're suddenly very busy and your attention is directed away from each other and onto keeping these little kids alive, she felt like all of her life was about breastfeeding babies and keeping a whole staff of people functioning, and she had to sit with all of these much older women, these diplomats' wives and things, and keep them entertained when she wasn't really interested in anything they were saying. I think that she was overwhelmed at what felt like a life of service, and I think that she missed the freedom of getting to do kind of whatever she wanted to do. Even without all of the battles with the staff, and even without having to keep all of these diplomats' wives entertained, I think that for somebody who had really been able to do basically whatever she wanted, to suddenly have so many children so quickly and to feel sort of isolated in that experience because her husband was off all the time. And, he came home and saw them, but then, it was right back to work. He definitely kind of gave her all rights to raising the kids. I think that would have been a really hard transition. Motherhood is a hard transition, even when you think you're prepared for it. Even when the only thing you have to do is raise your kids, it's a transition to know that your life and all of the things that you want to do kind of need to take a back seat to keeping this baby alive. Not to say that you completely lose yourself, but I think that there is a time for most women when you do lose yourself in having kids. And it takes a couple of years to come to the surface and remember who you were before you had kids. Because it's all about the diapers and the schedule and the nap times and the food. And your whole world becomes that baby. And so I'm sure she did feel like her life was very small compared to what it had been. And then on top of that, she had the servants and she had the diplomats' wives and all of this. So I don't want to be this callous person that's like, why didn't she just get her act together and love it? Well, I'm sure there was lots of elements that just felt like a lot. And then if you feel like you are unappreciated for your efforts, how many young mothers can tell the tale of feeling like you're slogging at home and your husband comes home and doesn't really look like you did anything all day, but you feel like you just did the biggest load of work you've ever done in your life, yet you have nothing to show for it. And when people don't appreciate the efforts that you've gone through all day, it can start to feel really hard. And of course, she had the whole world constantly criticizing her every move and waiting for her to do something foolish. Because remember, she had come very publicly from a countercultural lifestyle as this hippie wild child. And that certainly wasn't something that the establishment respected. So they wanted her to fail, to continue to propagate the narrative that this hippie lifestyle was a derogatory and lesser way of life. Now, I have to say that I don't know how many positive things she was doing as this hippie wild child. And it seems like it was kind of chaotic. When we read that part of the book, it seemed like her life was incredibly unsteady, and there was lots of poor decision making going on and lots of dangerous scenarios. So I'm not saying that the public perception of that wildlife wasn't correct, but the desire to constantly catch her at a mistake seems wrong to me, because this was a person who was trying to play now by society's rules. So why would you not want to encourage her as she's trying to do what society is asking her to do? And anyway, I just think that she really probably had a lot on her plate. We've already talked very briefly, she mentioned, though not extensively, about a breakdown that she had that led to hospitalization. We got no interesting details on that, but she mentioned it, so it must have been pretty bad if she felt she needed to go to a hospital for it. All this to say, by the time we get to this portion in the book, she's feeling like her efforts on the campaign trail were ignored, and that's leading to a series of rebellions. I don't want to do more of what I've already done. I tried to help, no one even noticed. Here I am, nobody cares about me. I'm just stuck at home with the babies, trying to deal with the servants and all their, petty problems. So she's taken mushrooms secretly in rebellion against what Pierre had asked her to do. Pierre no longer finds her wild, hippie ways like this cute little element of her personality. Now it's like, can you get with the program already? You've been here long enough. You know the rules. Like, quit having to complain about everything. Quit having to criticize everything. Like, just, you're here. You agreed to do it. Can we just get on with it? Because she was constantly wanting his ear, being like, why is it like this? And why is it like that? And why can't we do it this way? And after a while, I was like, girl, this is how it is. Like, can you just fall in line? Like, I'm tired of having to explain to you why this is how we have to do it. So he's kind of over it. And this love that she says that they had between them is crumbling. As I asserted in the last episode, you don't fall out of love. You stop working to be in love. I mean, when you meet somebody, it's not like, oh, we just fell in love and it was so easy. No, you are the best version of yourself. You're constantly thinking about them. You're leaving them little notes. You're bringing them little presents. You're constantly encouraging them. I'm so proud of you for this. Oh my gosh, tell me about that. Like, you worship this person. And then when people quote unquote fall out of love, I don't know that it's that you fell out of love. It's that you aren't the person that you were then. And understandably, they are no longer the person that they were then, because you're not showing them the affection anymore. They're not showing you the affection anymore. Of course, we have to be realistic with ourselves. It can't be like it was in those heady first days of a relationship. Nobody could maintain it. It's so frenetic. But you can still look for ways to show that person you are at the top of my priority list. And people stop doing that and then call that falling out of love. But if you treated the person that you quote unquote say you're falling out of love with the way you did when you first met them, I don't know that you'd be out of love now. And also, when you first met them, if you treated them then the way you're treating them now, you wouldn't have been in love in the first place, because they would have been like, what's wrong with that girl? Why she got a bad attitude all the time? So anyway, all this to say, she says she's falling out of love and their love is kind of like mysteriously dissipating. And that's why she's over there, eyeballing Castro and falling over when he tells her that he practices every day looking at the sun to strengthen his eyes. And that he's always found that very difficult. But it's nothing compared to trying to look at her beautiful blue eyes. Worst line of all time, you guys. And she just fell over herself, unable to handle these advances. My lord. Bring the smelling salts, She just was loving it. Anyway, time with Castro is over. She loved Cuba. She loved those daycare centers. That's what she loved. Get those kids over there where they're going to do the baby laundry over there and she didn't have to think about it. And now that beautiful and tropical and lovely experience has ended for her, and it's time to go to Venezuela. And that's where we pick up today. It's a long intro, but I think it's important because we have to remember where she is, because it's such a 180 from where she started being so agreeable. And now she's like, how many ways can I undermine my relationship with Pierre? Now she says, our next stop was Venezuela. As part of my briefing mania, I had already been in touch several times with Mrs. Schwartzman, our ambassador's wife, an extremely conscientious woman who had sent me details of Madame Perez's work with daycare programs and informative notes about the sort of people I was likely to meet. I was all set to like her. On arrival, I discovered she was a Cuban immigrant, and there's no one in the world who hates Cuba more. I was to learn this in Florida a couple months later. I was on holiday in a high-priced fat cat camp when I was mobbed by outraged Castro haters after I'd offered a local reporter a Cuban cigar. My enthusiasm about what I had seen fell on not just deaf, but decidedly chilly ears. I also soon saw just why the briefing notes had been so informative. People, social life, were her life. Their rank and pedigree were the spice of life to her, not some dreary chore to master. We weren't destined to get on. I was not in the mood for silly pretensions, nor was I in the mood for all the tedious lunches and cocktail parties she'd laid on for me. I took refuge in the guest house we were staying in, a charming, luxurious little house run by a friendly girl about my age, and brooded on the contrast between this social hell and my good times in Cuba. I just feel like, okay, Margaret, you were literally just shown Cuba by a dictator who wanted you to see all the best that he could muster. Maybe you should take a word from the person who ran from Cuba and find out what life was like as a true citizen, not under the care of the dictator who had a crush on you. Well, she's sitting there crying, sulking, wondering why the Cuban immigrant doesn't love Cuba the way she does. But she says that Madame Perez changed all this. I had asked to see her daycare program in operation and been told that it was out of the question, that Madame Perez ran it from an office in the city and never went near the poor areas herself. I felt bullshy. Okay, I said to Mrs. Schwartzman, why don't Madame Perez and all the ladies around here go and get their hair done, and I'll take a taxi down to the slums and have a look for myself? Consternation. Very sourly, Mrs. Schwartzman said that she would see what she could do. Okay, see, this is not how you go in and, make fun of people. You literally just met them. Why don't you guys go get your hair done and I'll go into the slums since you guys can't bestir yourselves? That might be a reality, that Madame Perez is not as involved in this daycare center as she claims to be. That wouldn't be an unusual thing, and it would be nice if she was more involved, but you literally just got here. Why are you being so sour to people? Why are you acting for the umpteenth time like you are the only person on earth who has any empathy or feelings about anything? And that, if everybody could be like you, maybe the world could spin a little better. She says that I hadn't until now really spoken to Madame Perez beyond the initial civilities. When I met her to discuss her work, I was immediately charmed. Look at that. Here I found was a delightful, warm figure with a great sense of humor and sparkling eyes, who, far from never visiting her centers, went there 5 days a week and kept the whole thing going by cajoling rich Venezuelans to part with their diamond earrings and ruby necklaces. She was only too happy to show me how it worked. See, now you find out the woman's decent, but you were over there being snappish. Why don't you, Mrs. Perez, get your hair done while I'll go down to the slums? What an embarrassing statement if you had just shut your mouth and found out about the people first before making all these snap judgments. We set off in a private coach, Madame Perez in a simple white dress, sturdy shoes, and a plain gold cross around her neck, me in a safari suit and slung round with cameras. We took Misha with us. When the bus drew to a halt, I happened to look behind at the other ladies, Madame Perez's entourage and various diplomatic wives. An identical expression of dismay and distaste was on all their faces, while their clothes were the most inappropriate I have ever set eyes on. High-heeled crocodile shoes, silk Pucci dresses, heavy gold jewelry, suede handbags. They were terrified. What had they let themselves in for? They could scarcely get off the bus, let alone walk along the rough, unmade roads. Madame Perez had arranged her program with ingenious simplicity. She'd asked a number of middle-aged women in the ghetto, whose own children had grown up and left home, to act as care mothers for 6 local children, orphans or children who were simply left to roam the streets. She had arranged for the women to be given an allowance for food and supplemented it with meals sent down by mobile vans. Then she had recruited volunteer teachers to come down and supervise some kind of lessons, and volunteer mobile health units to check on the children's physical condition. It was inspired. It took the children off the streets, gave the women a job, and involved Caracas University graduates in serious social work. Madame Perez herself blossomed among the ghetto children. All the families we called on seemed to know her very well, and the children crawled upon her lap with cries of pleasure. The sight touched me profoundly. Actually finding one of these social figures, and who more protocol-ridden one would have thought than Madame Perez, engaged in an extremely demanding job of her own, with no self-publicity and no fuss. So profoundly, in fact, that I decided to make some special gesture toward her. I had a sudden urge to write her a song and sing it to her myself. Okay. We were due to have a final dinner, just the 4 of us, the Perezes, Pierre and me, and my plan was to sing it afterward. Pierre was all for it. This is the first we've heard of her being a musician. I feel like every hippie thought that if they had a guitar, they could, like, be the next Joan Baez, but we shall see. Maybe it was great. Why am I being so hateful and catty? I'm sorry. Let me re-enter this with a more positive attitude. Maybe she really wanted to give a gift, and that's what felt like something that she could actually give her because she doesn't need money or things. She's doing fine in that department, so maybe she just thought this would be meaningful. Okay. Then our program got switched round. I find the memory of the scene almost too embarrassing to describe. Instead of our informal little dinner, the evening turned into a massive reception. Possibly the most formal and pretentious dinner I ever went to in all my years as Pierre's wife. The whole of smart Caracas was there, in full evening dress, with tiaras and medals. I had half decided to abandon my plan, but Pierre, to tease me, in malice, persuaded me to go ahead with it. What? Okay, when has Pierre, at any point along this line, treated her with disdain, malice, secretly tried to manipulate her into ugly situations? As we've said many times, she's never described him as cruel, unkind, or malicious, ever. Distracted by work, insistent on his own way because he'd been living by himself for 50 years before she showed up? Yes. But never malicious or manipulative. She will have had to have told me a few more stories about his secret malicious side before I'm able to believe that he shoved her into performing this song that she wrote maliciously and with the intent to embarrass her. I mean, honestly, even if it was a small gathering, I think the plan was embarrassing anyway. But to continue with the story, she says, so when the plates were cleared away, I rose unsteadily to my feet and delivered my little aria. Senora Perez, I would like to thank you. I would like to sing to you, to sing a song of love, for I have watched you with my eyes wide open. I have watched you with learning eyes. I hardly need to describe the effect. Half the guests were so embarrassed they kept their eyes riveted to their plates. A few of the Venezuelan women seemed touched and smiled their support. The Canadian delegation, to a man, was horrified. This, in the eyes of people like Ivan Head, was the last straw. Mrs. Trudeau had just gone too far. I could see a smirk from ear to ear. I wasn't exactly delighted with my performance, but the deed was done. In my own defense, I have to admit that had it not been for the liberal dose of belladonna a Caracas doctor had prescribed for stomach cramps, I undoubtedly would never have dared make such a fool of myself. I didn't regret the thought that was behind it, though. I got my reward the next night in the form of a delightful and intimate supper with the Perezes and their children at their private villa, a sumptuous presidential house with a pool, tennis courts, fountains, and terraces covered in bougainvillea. There we sat out in the magnificent gardens, played bowls, and laughed. Madame Perez returned my compliment by inviting one of Venezuela's best-known baritones to come and serenade me. It's all so embarrassing. Poor Madame Perez. If this whole thing had gone off without a hitch, this would have been like the highlight of the book. But it didn't, because what it all came down to was utter selfishness. She should have just gone to Madame Perez and said, thank you so much for showing me such a beautiful example of love and care for these little kids. I was so touched watching you really, from your full heart, care for them and let them crawl up on you and hug them, and you loved them and they so needed that, and it was such a blessing to me. Thank you. If she had said that in a quiet, pulled the woman aside and just told her, thank you for giving me the blessing of watching you love those little kids, that would have been a true thanks to that woman for what she'd experienced. But no, she had decided to write a song about it. Even if you had decided to get on one knee, at a quiet family dinner and sing her this song, that would have been an embarrassing situation to find yourself in. Put yourself in the place of Madame Perez and somebody is singing you a song about what they'd experienced. That's an unnatural expression of appreciation. Even at a small family dinner. Nobody was forcing her at that big dinner to say and to sing and to get up and make a spectacle. Who cares what Pierre wants? At that point, I'm okay, the plan's off. Okay, there's people are in tiaras, people are wearing medals. The plan is off. But then she did it, and then the doctor gave me belladonna for my stomach cramps. I just wanted to do it because it seemed, I'd already said I was going to. It's all humiliation. At what point was she going to abandon plan because it was wholly self-centered, and her, the creation of the plan had been to get some attention for herself from this woman that she admired? Why don't you just tell her thanks for being a blessing? Leave it at that. But then to have this lady, bring in a baritone to sing to you. I mean, I'm sure that it was kind of a wavery little tune that she'd sung at that dinner. And now this legitimate singer is coming and serenading her. I mean, it kind of makes a mockery of what she'd attempt to do. Like, the whole thing is so embarrassing. The episode was to have its repercussions. The first morning we were back in Ottawa, having reached home late the night before, I set my clock radio to wake me at 9. It was an arctic cold morning. I was lying snugly under the quilt half asleep when suddenly I heard an outraged voice saying, "I think she's an absolute disgrace to this country. She is a disgrace to every Canadian woman. She has no right at all to sing ridiculous songs in official company." This was followed by a second, more reasonable voice, a man this time. "Well, no, I don't agree with you. She's trying to be honest, at least." In an instant, I was as frozen inside the bed as the air was outside. I wanted to crawl to the bottom of that bed and never come out. My instinct was to switch off the sound, but then I forced myself to listen. A caller came on. "Hey, Margaret, if you're out there listening, just you keep doing it. You are a gift to us." This friend was a friend indeed, but there were all too few like him. The next 6 callers had nothing but venom and spite. At this point, the interviewer chipped in. "I doubt you're listening, Margaret Trudeau, but if by any chance you are, why don't you give us a call? Here's the number. The lines are now free. Call in." I shot up in bed, seized the phone, and dialed. "I meant no insult to anyone," I said stoutly in my own defense, stirred out of my terror by what I felt was monstrous misunderstanding. "I admire Madame Perez, and I don't only think she's an excellent Prime Minister's wife, but she's working very hard for her own people in her own right, and I wanted to sing a song in admiration." The critics were momentarily silenced, but that phone call started a whole new area of criticism. Should the wife of the Prime Minister of Canada phone into talk shows? The following week, I was offered a phone-in show of my own on the local Ottawa early morning show. Luckily, Pierre was away, so he wasn't in a position to forbid it. I decided to accept the invitation simply because I had reached breaking point. I was sick to death of all the sneers and criticism that I was never allowed to answer. My sharp tongue, it seemed, got me into trouble whatever I did. I was tired of hearing people say, "How can such a lovely girl say such terrible things?" And now I was really going to give it to them. The presenter, Michael O'Connell, opened the show by asking, "Now, Margaret, is there any song that you would like for us to play to start the program?" "Yes," I replied immediately. "A song called Garden Party by Rick Nelson." It was about how he went to a garden party and everyone was either rude or unpleasant to him. In the song he sings, "If you can't please everybody, you might as well please yourself." Then the phone call started. Many, I was relieved to find, were friendly, and they grew friendlier as the show went on, and as I put across some of my own feelings and difficulties without having them misrepresented by the press. A few were censorious, like sharp-tongued nannies. A couple were outright hostile. I tried to be as reasonable and calm as I could. My rage was really with the press, not with the public. I felt that there had been a growing campaign among the more malicious newsmen to put me in as bad a light as could be found and distort everything I did and said. The battle had reached its peak on our return flight from Venezuela. That day, prompted by a feeling that we had, after all, spent a frenzied 3 weeks of hard work altogether, and yet scarcely met, I decided to leave our suite in the front of the plane and go back and talk to them. It was the first time I had done so, and I was taken aback by the boozing and jollity I found. Nonetheless, I made my way somewhat awkwardly to where my photographer friend Rod McIver was sitting and sat chatting with him about the song in Caracas. "Will you sing it to us?" asked one of the reporters in a friendly manner. I hesitated. And then I thought it would seem standoffish to refuse, so in a wavering voice I obliged. Meanwhile, another man had handed me a bottle of good Cuban rum, and though I don't drink, I took a swig to play my part. That was my error. The papers next day were full of stories about my carousing with newsmen and swigging back booze straight from the bottle, and transcripts of my songs circulated around Ottawa for weeks. I felt shattered, totally betrayed. And that was enough. I didn't go with Pierre on his next official visit to Britain and Germany. I simply refused to go. I felt too scared. She just seems to have some of the poorest instincts I feel like I've ever seen. Why would she think these people are her friend? Have they been her friend yet? The press has always gone after her and always made something of the things that she has done. I can't imagine that she went back there because she really thought that these people were her friends, but that she was trying to manage the story that she knew would come out about her singing at the party. And she obviously must have been proud of the song if she was going to sing it again for these people. I mean, she was in the literal lion's den. How much... I mean, she says, I sang the song originally because of the belladonna the doctor gave me for my stomach cramps. Was the doctor giving you more belladonna? Because you literally went to the lion's den and then sang them the same song that had received such mocking the first time. Her instincts, man, they're all wrong. Anyway, the thing is that, like, I am sorry for her that it seems it would be so hard to be criticized constantly, but then she does things that are just so strange. Who writes a song and sings it at a formal dinner? I don't understand. And then who goes back to the crouching lion's den where they're all ready to spring on her and sings it again? And she says she didn't drink. She says she doesn't drink. I wasn't a drinker. Well, you do take mushrooms when no one's looking. Like, what are these differentiations she makes in her mind as though she is above the fray? I don't drink. I mean, yes, at that point I was taking a few swigs to play a part, but I'm not a drinker. No, you just secretly take shrooms. You know what I'm saying? It's like, Margaret, I find you a non-credible witness in your own defense. Anyway, she says, I wasn't let off the hook for long. 1976 was official year par excellence. No sooner was one case unpacked, it seemed to me, than I was back up in the attic dragging it down again for the next round of parties, receptions, airports, and pleasantries. It was Olympics year. Pierre and I received the whole world in Montreal. I was looking forward to it enormously. For once, formality was to be mixed with fun, and dozens of people were coming through Canada whom I had wanted to meet for years. Before moving up to a suite at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal for 2 weeks, we had a series of informal lunch parties at Ottawa. The sailing events were being held in Kingston, and when the Queen arrived on Britannia, she invited us for dinner to watch the final heats. It was a horrible evening. Blustery, raining hard, the sea as grey as the sky. Pierre and I were accompanied by the lieutenant governors and premiers of all the provinces and their wives. We were picked up from shore by the Queen's barge, and as we climbed on board the Britannia in the pitching seas, I was standing chatting to Madame Legier. She had the Order of Canada pinned to her black chiffon evening dress. As she reached up to clasp the steps, her brooch became loose and slipped off her bosom and down into the water. There was an outcry. The security frogmen patrolling the boat were immediately alerted and spent a fruitless evening diving for it in the grey, opaque water while poor Madame Legier never ceased bewailing her loss. I was deeply disappointed by what I found on board. I'd expected luxury and style. Instead, I found overstuffed, faded chintz sofas, bland, wishy-washy colors, and a total lack of elegance. It was like finding the Queen herself in an old cotton print dress. The main salon looked more like the drawing room of an English country house than a luxury liner. The sheer lack of pretension verged on the shabby. None of this extended to the staff, however, who were immaculately turned out in starch white and waited on us with naval promptitude, nor to the china and linen, nor to the food, which was superb. As the Queen swept down the massive staircase in the main salon, which made the boat more like a house than ever, she imposed her own grandeur. It was my first taste, that curious blend of shabby and the very grand. I feel like I've made comments on every paragraph, but you guys, since we've known Margaret for a little while longer, I find myself always commenting more towards the end of books because now we know the characters. And I find it so hypocritical that she is completely downcast when she finds that people are quote-unquote stuffy, according to her definition of it, that they care about getting their hair done and their nails done, that care so much about unimportant things. But she doesn't extend that same prejudice to her absolute Nazism when it comes to decor that she favors. She has a certain look that she's always after, and she will walk into a place and just absolutely castigate it and anybody who thinks this is acceptable. But that's the same attitude that she disdains others for having when it comes to protocol or hairstyles or just things that she finds petty and unimportant. Well, maybe the Queen doesn't care if it's a chintz cover on the sofa. Maybe there's more important things like, I don't know, watching the budget and not outfitting her yacht with the taxpayers' money because she cares about things like that, and frugality is important to her when it comes to things that don't matter. She's not going to serve you a plate of slop. She definitely went all out for the food. But does it really matter what the couch looks like? Like, we need to watch our pennies. And I just have to say that I respect the fact that the Queen wasn't, sailing around in absolute luxury, because she could have. But she chose not to because that wasn't the most important thing at that event. The staff, as she says, very well turned out. The food was delicious. Why is Margaret so cutting when it comes to decor that doesn't suit her whim? But she has all kinds of hate for people who are frivolous in manners that she considers unimportant. A few nights later, installed at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, I found myself unexpectedly receiving Prince Charles for dinner. Hearing how well his sister was doing in the Olympics horse events, he had decided to make a flying trip to Canada to join his family. This was the evening of our big reception for the Queen, dinner for 300 in the Beaver Club. The seating had all been arranged. When I heard of his arrival, I sent for the plan. Prince Charles, I found, had been squeezed in next to Maureen McTeaver. Out came my pencil. I switched him and put him next to me, in place of Prince Andrew. This wasn't my first real encounter with the prince. That had come years before, when I was pregnant with Justin. As he led me out of a dance in my décolleté Valentino dress, I had caught him peering down the front. He blushed. My father always told me to look into my partner's eyes when she's wearing a low-cut dress, he said laughingly. Feast ye while ye may, I replied. If I wasn't 3 months pregnant, there'd be nothing to see. That night at the hotel, we had a marvelous time, so wonderful and full of jokes that a photographer caught us giggling together behind a shared menu and splashed the picture across the papers. Prince Philip reprimanded his son for monopolizing my attention. Prince Andrew kept the table in tears of laughter, and even the Queen's secretary, a charming, affable man, whom I had become very fond of during the Queen's frequent visits to Canada, felt relaxed enough to take snuff. He offered me a pinch. Laughing, I took one and breathed deeply. At that moment the table rose, and in a procession led by the Queen and Pierre, we paired off 2 by 2 to walk through the crowd. As we swept into the crowd, a huge gob of brown snot landed on my exposed bosom, and a photograph I still cherish shows Prince Andrew, Prince Philip, and Prince Charles all staring down with a mixture of astonishment and disgust. Eey. Lord, that is unfortunate. Man. Does Margaret have no luck? That was the only evening I ever saw the Queen really go and literally kick her shoes off. After the reception, she asked Pierre and me to go back with the royal family to the Britannia, where she ordered sausages and scrambled eggs while we sat around in tears of laughter over Prince Andrew's jokes and impersonations of people he had met. He and Pierre got on marvelously. Both share a particular taste for practical jokes, Pierre's taking the form of pointing out trees in the forest when we used to take the children for walks and saying, "How much do you want to bet me I can knock down that tree?" The children gaped when, sure enough, with one mighty kick the tree came thundering down. Pierre had developed a keen eye for rotting trunks. In late August, King Hussein and Queen Alia of Jordan invited us to spend a holiday with them. It was a tricky situation because of the politics involved, but since I wanted to go so badly, and Pierre felt it would be good for me, we solved the diplomatic hurdle by saying that we would spend 1 week in Jordan and a 2nd week in Israel, thereby offending no one. Actually, we were delighted. Both Pierre and I had dreamed of a biblical pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Just as a real quick note, this Pierre person who's willing to sidestep politics in order to please his wife and give her a vacation that she wanted, or at least a trip that she wanted to see an area that was of interest to her, is supposedly the same person who pushed her into singing a song that she wrote and decided to embarrass herself, but I think Pierre might have done it out of malice. This is a person who's walking into the very difficult and unsteady waters of the Middle East conflicts to make sure that you get to go on a trip that you want to go on. But this is supposedly supposed to be the person that tried to publicly embarrass you? Not buying it. Our week in Jordan was delightful, and Alia, whom I had first met and got to like in 1974, became a closer friend than ever. But from the moment we hugged goodbye at the Hussein Bridge on the Jordan side and walked across into Israel, everything changed. A smartly dressed business delegation was waiting to greet us. Ambassadors were lined up and bowing. From that second on, protocol reigned. We were never alone. We were pressured and propagandized and lectured and harassed. I was so furious that my manners got worse and worse. Pierre went as far as to call me a detestable traveling companion. I believe she probably was. Because this is a person who is so unfamiliar with the politics of any region that she goes into situations and decides that her first instinct has got to be the right one. I'm not saying that she wasn't harassed and propagandized. I believe she was propagandized in Cuba as well. But this is a person who just does not know how to handle her internal feelings. She doesn't know how to put on a pleasant face. And she has decided that putting on a pleasant face when you feel grumpy is some kind of dishonesty. And I'm here to tell you that it isn't always. That sometimes when you're a guest in somebody else's country and home, just put on a smile, feel however you want inside. But you're not here to kind of sass everyone because you're having a bad day or you have a feeling about a certain thing. I just feel like her complete inability to give of herself if she just didn't feel like it is getting old. And if I were Pierre, I would be like, I am never taking you anywhere again. I should have, of course, have given in, accepted what was happening and gone along with it. But this was supposed to be a holiday, not an official visit, and God knows we deserved one. We needed to be alone. Driving back from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem one night after dinner, the Canadian ambassador climbed into the back seat with us. I kicked him straight back out. Go get a lift in another car, I said rudely. Pierre was furious. I don't care how rude I am, I said, by now in tears. We have had a romantic dinner, and even then we barely escaped having it with 25 other people. I want to drive down and cuddle in your arms, and I don't want to sit here while this ambassador goes on chit-chatting the whole way about arms and defense. Another day, we went up to Asada. It was midday, and the sun was beating down uncomfortably on our heads, made worse by the pressing, jostling crowds and the fact that the turban I was wearing cut into my forehead. I wondered whether I was about to faint. Probably. Then a reporter appeared at my elbow and began to ask me questions. I very nearly told him to F off. Just leave me alone, I wailed. Pretend I'm not even here. He tried to explain. Well, but you are here. The Israelis are so pleased to have the Prime Minister of Canada visit them at this time. It's important to us. You aren't just any old tourists. Yes, we are. We're on holiday, I said stubbornly. He shook his head. The point of it all was that I was perfectly willing to behave as well as I could on official occasion, but not on vacation. This, I felt, was a shabby and disgraceful trick. This time, even Pierre lost patience with me. Not only are his manners naturally better than mine, but he also wanted very much to hear what the Israelis were thinking at that moment. He was incensed, too, at my atrocious behavior and felt it reflected badly on me, on him, and on Canada generally. How can she think that the world can divorce her from who she is in life to who she is on vacation? She's still the Prime Minister's wife, even if she is on vacation. And yes, I can understand being like, man, I wish that I could just kind of go and be on vacation and not be the Prime Minister's wife. Well, you are, though. From Tel Aviv, we flew to Rome. This was to be a semi-official visit, so by now I was ready to start acting again. It started very promisingly, with a dinner party given for us by our ambassador, at which one of my great heroines, Sophia Loren, was present. She was funny and easy and engaging, and both Pierre and I got to love her dearly. Part of our reason for visiting Italy was to see the Pope, who had granted us a private audience at his summer residence. Before leaving Ottawa, I had inquired whether I needed to wear anything special, and had been told that a plain dress with long sleeves would be correct. Did it have to be black because I didn't actually own a long-sleeved black dress? No. Did I need to wear a hat? Absolutely not. So I had decided on an off-white coat and skirt with a long-sleeved silk shirt. A beautiful haute couture outfit I was longing to show off. The first thing I found on landing in Rome was a note from the papal legate, enclosed a document heading Presentation to the Pope, with the rules all typed out. In them I was instructed to wear a formal black dress and a hat or some kind of cover for my head. What could I do? It was too late to buy anything. The ambassador's wife lent me a black lace veil for my head, and I resigned myself to the inevitable. Mrs. Trudeau defies protocol. Again. Can I just say that as somebody who had converted to Catholicism, had she never seen a picture of anybody visiting the Pope? Because it's always black with something covering. Like, I can't even think of any picture I have ever seen of anybody who's gone to visit the Pope who was not wearing a veil and black. And for somebody who seems to pride themselves in knowing everything at all times, especially when it comes to protocol, of which she had been involved for many years at this point, I'm surprised that she is, like, once again not knowing. Now, granted, she says she did ask, but why did she ask? I think that's my question. Who has ever heard of going before the Pope and not covering their head? At this stage, Pierre and I had both realized that something had gone seriously wrong with our marriage. Yeah, We had had too many arguments, too much bitterness not to feel that this visit to Rome might be our last chance. Or a second honeymoon. This made our audience with the Pope all the more important, particularly as I felt that my faith was slipping fast. Since we were being given a private audience with the Pope, Pierre said that I should be ready to talk openly, because if there was anyone in the world who could help, it was surely him. So I wrote out a little list of questions and put it in my bag. We set off in the morning to Castel Gandolfo, the superb summer palace of the popes, overlooking the lake of Albano, south of Rome. We were led out to the terrace to wait for our audience. This was true solemnity, protocol, carried to its ultimate degree. Every step had to be right, every movement. We were escorted from room to room, ever closer to the inner sanctuary as the moment of our audience grew nearer. The Swiss guard stood rigid to attention. There was a profound atmosphere of dignity, elegance, and awe. Then the summons came. I was trembling. The Pope, I felt, was surrounded by an atmosphere of intense spirituality, the sort of spirituality that even I, who question everything, would not question. Pierre and I were seated opposite him across the desk. He and Pierre began by discussing the problems of the world, international politics, and how to bring about a peaceful solution to the Middle East. Pope Paul was impressively well-informed and full of unexpected insights. He brought their conversation to a close by asking Pierre if he had any special problems with his faith that he would like to discuss, any problems that needed solving. "No, thank you, Holiness," said Pierre. Pope Paul turned to me. "Mrs. Trudeau, I understand that you have beautiful sons, and that you are a very good mother to your 3 lovely boys." I sort of bowed my head and smiled. "Ah," he went on reflectively, "aren't the children of the world our hope for the future?" He turned back to me. "I understand, too, that you are a very good wife to your husband and have always supported him throughout the difficult job of being Prime Minister. God bless you." He made the sign of the cross over us. The audience was over. A second later we were out of the room and walking down the stairs, and Pierre burst out laughing. "Bad luck you didn't get to ask your questions." I was piqued. "Well, I could hardly raise them without him asking me. You got asked whether you had any problems, you old hypocrite. Why don't you tell him?" Pierre said smugly, "I've nothing to say that I would be willing to say in front of you." I was forced to laugh too. Inside, though, I felt bitter. I'd come all this way just to be told to go on being a good wife and mother. In the fall, there was still one more major official visit to pay. This time to Japan, the apogee of protocol. We were put up in Akasaka, a splendid palace modeled on Versailles, where our bedroom was all peach silk, with carved wooden ceilings, rich tapestries, and magnificent paintings, with sheets of the finest muslin I have ever seen. Before we went to sleep each night, we were visited by 2 tiny masseuses, with hands and muscles of iron, who pounded us so hard that I finally begged to be let off, complaining that I had no wish to be beaten up after such intolerably hard days. For they were hard. The protocol and the stuffiness exceeded anything even I had come across. Every outing we made was planned down to the last second. 10:28, step into the car. 10:32, step out of the car. 10:37, greet curator, and so on. Everywhere politeness. I was always late, rushed, hassled. Even the grandeur had lost its charm, though I was startled out of my complaints when I found that the melons that 120 people ate at the Emperor's lunch party cost $40 each. One of the things that I always enjoy on the official trips was the press conference that Pierre inevitably held on his last morning. It was a custom between us that I should attend it with him. In Japan, the morning he was to give it, I found a separate day's timetable typed out for me. "Mrs. Trudeau, free day. Perhaps a walk in the garden?" I stormed up to Ivanhead. He explained patiently, but not without a touch of malice, that there were to be no women at the press conference and that my presence would therefore be rather tactless. I made a scene. Finally, with a resigned sigh, Pierre agreed. When the time came to leave for it, we proceeded down the 50 stairs of our palace, lined by dignitaries and officials bowing, and reached the cars. I was steered away from Pierre's car. I bulked loudly. Pierre sighed, "Okay, let her come with me." By now I knew I was behaving badly, but I seemed to be possessed. I climbed into Pierre's car. The doors were closed. Unfortunately, Pierre chose to be very patronizing. It was too much. I leaped to my feet, clasping the door handle. It didn't open. We were locked in. I started screaming. The horrified Japanese guard hastily unlocked the door, and under the amazed and startled gaze of the officials standing in serried ranks up the stairs bowing, I rushed up 3 steps at a time, shouting, "F you!" at the top of my voice. It wasn't easy to live that one down. As Pierre grew more worried about my outbursts, so he kept repeating, "You must do exactly what you want to do. You can do anything you want." The trouble was that I needed direction, not freedom. My outbursts were cries for attention. that's the end of our reading, and I'm trying to contemplate the last thing we just read. Her outbursts are cries for attention, that she needed direction, not freedom. What are you talking about, Margaret? All you've done this whole time is saying, everybody's constantly choking me with all their rules. No, can people just let me be a free spirit? And now you're like, I need direction, not freedom, and I need attention. When people try to give you attention, you're like, F off already. Okay, I'm on vacation. Leave me the F alone. Margaret is just saying whatever she wants to say. I mean, like, she keeps feeding us these lines, and I'm like, I'm going to need a few data points to support this thesis. I don't understand what she's talking about half this time. I want to be compassionate. I do. I love nothing more than to look at the situation that a person's in, look at the way they behaved, and then consider from all sides why that might have been their reaction. I love it. But I'm having a hard time squaring what she's doing with what she's saying, because she's telling us a lot of different things, and sometimes nothing at all. And nothing that would help me to understand how we got from 0 to 60 like this. Like, how are we beating on windows, screaming, let me out of the car, after you just said I want to get in the car? And then bounding up the stairs, screaming to these dignitaries who have done nothing but be overly polite to you. F you! F you! I don't understand this. Like, I want to be compassionate. But I am reaching my point here where, I mean, I knew this day would come. I really did. Like, I've always known that when she finally got around to telling us why she had to leave Pierre, it just wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, I don't know how he was. She said he was patronizing in the car or whatever. And she doesn't describe what their words were or how he was being. And it can be very annoying when people are patronizing you when you're already in a bad mood. But again, why was she in a bad mood? She had done something that she knew she wasn't supposed to do. They had asked her not to attend this thing. And it's like, for somebody who seems like they want to be culturally sensitive, because she talks about this from time to time, she doesn't seem to be very good at doing it. It wasn't appropriate for her to go to this thing. And just because Ivan Head had said, I don't think you should go, that's why we're giving you a day off, isn't she the one that just finished freaking out that she never had any time off? That it was just time down to the minute. And now they're like, why don't you take a walk in the gardens? Excuse me. I always go to these things. I'm not going to miss out on this one. No. And then throw an absolute fit when they let you in the car and you're going. And then it's like, I'm not going to this. No way am I going to this. You're the one that just threw a fit to be there. Like, I can't follow it, you guys. I can't. If any of you are feeling like you have insight that I have completely missed, please drop it in the comments. I don't get it, but I want to. What do you know about Margaret? What have I missed in this reading? Am I too... Do I have blinders on? Am I too impatient with her childishness that I can't see her side of it? Help me understand. What do you guys think about this behavior that we've seen in this chapter and her explanations of that behavior? Okay, I'll see you guys next Sunday. I'm really into this book. I hate to have to wait till next Sunday, but unfortunately that's the way things are going to work out. But I'm looking forward to next Sunday. What do you guys think about this reading? See you later this week. Bye.